Hi, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Let's have you start at the top. Introduce yourself and talk about this amazing book project that you've been working on and has
Sure.
have now published.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Anne Marie Mazzotti Govea, and my book is Drifter's Realm. It's book one in a series of three. The release date was May 3rd. It's hybrid published, meaning I've worked with somebody to help me through the process, but I own all the rights to it.
Awesome. That's great. So let's start by just talking about give me sort of the elevator pitch. What's the book all about? My daughter's reading it. I have not had a chance to read it yet. I had
Sure.
the honor of bumping into you in a bookstore, but tell me a little bit about it.
So it's an adventure, magical realism type story set in a fantasy world that I've created called Drifter's Realm. And in this world, um, children aged 12 to 18 start their journey through Drifter's Realm by going through something called a gifting ceremony. And in the gifting ceremony, teenagers are given obligations. And along with their obligation, they're given a backpack that matches that obligation's power or magic. So, for example, there are teenagers who are tamers who have spotted backpacks that look like leopards. And there's a life giver, and her backpack is covered with these beautiful flowers. So these teenagers go to this place called Drifter's Realm, and they live on these farms. And the farms have catchy names like Eden, Bliss, Paradise, and they all live in an area where they are surrounded by slightly scarier places like the Unforgettable Forest, the Wandering Plains, Desolation Mountains, Impossible Lake. And there's a leader and a place called First City that's very far north and west from all where these teenagers live. And he has a daughter, and she's a storm catcher. So she has like the ability to control weather. So the story is built around these three siblings who live together on Paradise Farm, Ro, Theo, and Ori. And the story begins sort of in progress, where you meet Ro and you meet Theo and you meet the people on their farm, and you find out that Ori disappeared. Their brother disappeared months ago, but nobody knows why. So, and then to top it all off, because this is a world where there's no technology, no cell phones, nothing is really metal. It's like a world in the future. A crossbow suddenly appears in Ro's life giver backpack, and she becomes alarmed, and she's eventually chased by these spiritual beings called guardians. Now, the guardians are meant to keep peace. They're these very life looking, spiritual type floating entities that are pearl colored and white. But when they become alarmed or afraid, they turn black or like deep indigo. And so she finds herself at the lily pond, and she realizes she has a crossbow in her backpack on the edge of the unforgettable forest. And the guardian sees it, and he starts to chase her. And that's where the story begins. The story begins with her running for her life from a very dark colored guardian chasing her through the unforgettable forest. And eventually she has to stand up and face the guardian. What she has in her backpack is a crossbow, and weapons are not allowed. So, and there's no explanation at the beginning of the story of why the crossbow's there, but you find out as the story continues. So, what ends up happening is her brother, between herself and her brother, they're able to stop the guardian, but that prompts the journey that leads them through Drifter's Realm. And that's where the story begins, is that she and her brother and other people from their farm make their way through Drifter's Realm to try to understand why the crossbow's in the backpack. And then there's other entities or how do you want to say it, characters in the story. There's a group of teenage boys called the Menace who've sort of left the farms and formed their own community in caves. So the story is about how they make their way through Drifter's Realm, what happens when they meet up with the Menace. They eventually discover that their brother Ori is with the Menace, And then the story just sort of takes off from there.
That is so interesting. And I think you mentioned to me that nobody has cell phones or any kind of electronic devices. Is that right?
There's no cell phones, no laptops, no computers. Books are considered extremely sacred. There's each farm has a knowledge bearer, somebody who controls and manages the books. They're ancient. Their backpacks have practical things in them, and they can keep like a certain number of items in their backpack. Like Rose, she's a life giver. She could pull like a whole entire cot out of her backpack and it'll be normal sized, and she can put it back in there and it'll be small enough to where it's safely stored in her backpack. So there's an element of realism in the fact that she has things that she can use to help heal people, just her character, for example. But then there's this element of magic where she has this magical blue elixir that only she knows how to create, that she manages to sprinkle on people, and then they become healed. So it's a little mix of realism with, with magical pieces thrown in there. And they all live outside. So they either live in huts or tents or in the caves, in the case of the Menace, or in sandstone buildings, but they're not living in a traditional world. They're surrounded by swamps, waterfalls, mountain ranges. They're really basically out of nature.
That is so interesting. And what would you say are the kind of metaphorical inferences that this might represent?
For me, it represents a simpler time. And the whole reason behind writing a story like this is because technology is everywhere. It pretty much surrounds us. And I miss those days where, kids used to just go in their backyard and build a fort out of, I don't know, odds and ends of plywood, or hang out, in trees, or run around playing hide and go seek. I just sort of miss those times where life was simpler. So for me, metaphorically, all these things represent an innocent time, a time when having fun meant using the things that you had with you, and maybe not necessarily plopping down in front of a computer and playing, I don't know, Super Mario Kart or one of those games. So,
and do you have children?
Oh my gosh, I have 4 grown children and 4 grandchildren. So I have 3 sons and a daughter, and then I have 3 grandsons and a granddaughter. And I grew up in a family of 7 kids. I'm the youngest of 7 kids. And so I've had enough experience of being around kids, either in my own home or just as a child, being the youngest of 7. I miss that, that interaction that siblings have. So the story is littered full of siblings, brothers and sisters, twins, triplets, because the story at its heart is very much about family, friendship, overcoming adversity, and there being an underlying theme of hope that these kids can somehow pull themselves together and stop what's happening from the leader, who's supposed to be a good person, and they find out obviously he's not, of this whole area called Drifter's Realm.
That is so interesting. And how old are your children and your grandchildren now?
So my oldest is 38 and our youngest child is 35. So we have a 38, a 36-year-old, and 2 35-year-olds. And then our grandchildren are 10, 7, 4, and 2.
So you've got a lot going on. And you mentioned to me when I met you that you had taken some time off of your corporate job to take care of your aging parents.
Right.
And that sort of changed your life trajectory a little bit. Can you talk to me about that?
Oh yeah, it completely changed my life trajectory. So first of all, I have to start by saying I really admire my mother and father. They were so down to earth. They believed in family and education and helping people, especially my mother. I'm not saying she was a saint, because no one is a saint, but she spent her life helping people, and so did my father. So when they became ill later in life, I became their caretaker. They asked me, they put it in their living trust, will you be the person who makes all the medical decisions for us? And I'm, of course, absolutely. You know, these people mean so much to me, and to my family and to my children. So when they started to become ill, I started trying to balance work and helping them. And I did it successfully for a while. I mean, I was the senior most woman in an IT organization at Lam Research Corporation, you know, a multi-billion-dollar company. I reported to the CIO. I had worked there for 30 years, but I got to a point where I could no longer balance my managing director position as an executive, you know, leading integrations and mergers and acquisitions. I just couldn't balance that with what my mom and dad needed. It was impossible. And my mother had Alzheimer's near the end. My father had cancer, and he was trying to outlive her because he didn't want her to be alone. So he actually had his kidney removed. We found a doctor that would remove his kidney when he was 94 years old. I mean, unheard of, because he didn't want her to be alone. So I got involved in being part of their day-to-day care. We had people who did the actual care, but I was there, and I took a leave of absence to be part of this. And when my leave of absence came up a year later, I was told, hey, you know, it's been a year, can you come back? My parents were both still alive at the time. And so I racked my brain over, you know, what the right thing to do was, but I knew in my heart I had gone that far with them. I couldn't leave them to the end. I couldn't do it. So I turned down the opportunity to go back and assume the role I had, and potentially at some point maybe become the CIO of that company, because being with them, I knew was an experience. If I didn't be part of it, I would regret that decision. So my mother passed away 6 weeks after I turned my job down, and my dad passed away like 6 weeks after her. So it sort of landed me in a strange situation that I hadn't planned on. But one of the things my mom encouraged me to do was to write, because she was a writer herself. She did it, you know, as a hobby, not as a way to make money. So that's when I started writing the story, and I just poured my heart into that story. So I've had people read it who said, man, that one area brought me to tears, or that other section made me laugh out loud. And which makes me feel good, because there's a lot of me in my life in that story. But that's how this all came about. And I dedicated the book to them.
That's beautiful. By the way, if you have your book handy, it would be awesome if you could reach for it and just to show us some of those beautiful images, because I believe each chapter starts, yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And each chapter starts with a beautiful image, correct?
Yes. Oh, yeah. So the whole story, you can't have an adventure story to me without a map. So oops, I'm going the wrong way. So clearly there's a map in here, and it's a very detailed map. So you might actually, depending on how good your eyesight is, you might need a magnifying glass. But the map is necessary. In fact, the second book also has the map in there with some changes to it. And then this is the picture of Ro being chased by the Guardian through the unforgettable forest. So she's sort of trying to get away. Her hair is blowing behind her. She's got her flowered backpack on her back, and she's heading upwards towards the falls. And then I'll just show you one other picture.
Okay.
Yeah, so and I wanted the story to have pictures like this, because anytime you create a land, there's a risk of, okay, so what does this place really look like? So this one's a little tougher to see, but this is one of my favorite pictures. So in this chapter, this is Ro laying in a place called, it's a pond, but it's basically called the Blue Pool. And those are yellow water lilies around her. And what's happening in this picture, it's nighttime, and she realizes that her father is no longer alive. And he's found a way to come to her in the water and give her all his memories from his life, so that she can figure out how to save Drifter's Realm. So this is like a really touching moment where she realizes he's no longer alive, but he's still trying to help her, and he sacrifices himself. You don't ever see the guy die, and there's nothing like that, but you just know that this is what's happened. So this is later on in the book.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. So I have a middle grade reader. That's why I had walked into the bookstore that particular day to, in search of a book for her middle grade reader friend. And so it was perfect to see this. And I think the inclusion of some pictures, even if it's, at the beginning of each chapter, it kind of invites them in a different way, or it gives children sort of a different appreciation, it seems.
Yeah, I've had a lot of positive feedback on the pictures. In fact, when I've talked to people just to see, what do you think? Is it too much? Every single person said, can you put pictures in the second book? Are you going to use the same artist? And so I did. The second book has pictures at the beginning of every chapter. I mean, it's obviously not released yet. And the same artist did all the artwork. So I'm really happy with how the first book turned out. And I'm glad that I included the pictures.
So it sounds like this sort of inevitable tragedy, which is that life is only so many years. We have a finite amount of time, and you ended up losing your parents. It sounds like sort of this maybe life experience was an opportunity to take stock of what are the things that are on my list, and what does my next chapter look like? It sounds like.
So before my father died, he had all his wits about him, and he was 97 when he passed away. And there was, like I said, there was about a 6-week period of time when my mother passed away until he passed away. And he was pretty coherent all the way up until about the day before he passed away. But I remember sitting with him after she passed away, and talking to him, and he kept saying to me, honey, there is so much more to life than just work. There's art, there's music, there's sports, there's beauty in the world. He just said, don't think that work, because I was really good at my job. I mean, I won all kinds of awards where I worked. I mean, people at the company knew me. I mean, I was very well respected where I worked. But I think what he was trying to tell me is, listen to me, I'm 97. And just remember, there's more to life than work. And it's up to each one of us to figure out how to find those things that have true meaning, and then, embrace them and hold them tight, or move on to the next thing until you find something that you can fully embrace. I never knew, honestly, when I started writing how much I was going to love it. And it hit me like running into a brick wall. I fell in love with writing when I wrote that story. And I didn't even know I had it within me, because I was grieving at the same time for losing both my parents. But it was really something that he said, which I just relayed to you, that made me think, hey, should I really go back? I mean, I already worked at that company for 30 years. So I'm glad that what happened gave me a moment to pause and just say, okay, he's right. There is more to life.
That's so beautiful. And then I also think, sometimes women start to feel a little bit maybe less seen as we get older, as for those of us who've been parents, as our children age. And so, and then some people also think, well, I'm already a grandma now, for example, like not me, but like, you could have thought that, like, I've got my grandchildren, I had my career. Why even worry? And what would your answer be to that?
Oh, my answer would be that as I need to keep moving. I mean, honestly, my brain and my body and every part of me, I just want to keep going. I know that there's so many things out there that I don't know, that I want to learn. And just, playing the guitar, and I want to go back and pick up my German. I lived in Germany years ago, but I haven't spoke German in like 30 something years. So I think that if you were standing still, you're probably actually going backwards and you don't really know it. And I don't mean learn technology and stuff like that, because I already know that. I have an IT background. I can help you with your laptop, your iPhone, whatever. I already know all that stuff. I just mean I want to learn more about the world, and I want to be engaged in it in a level that goes beyond just being a grandmother and a former executive. And writing is just one of those things that I do. I also mentor women. It's a volunteer mentoring through Women Unlimited Incorporated, and I've been doing that for 4 years, because I kind of want to give back in a way that's meaningful, because I was a woman executive at a company where there were, for every 100 men, when I would go to executive meetings, there were 10 women for every 100 men at those higher levels. So for me, I'm not ready to stop. I'm going to be going like this probably for decades.
That's wonderful. What would you say if you had to think about the most important lesson that you've learned on your journey so far, from the days that you were mother, executive, and now caretaker for your parents, and then now writer? What would you say is the most important lesson you've learned on your journey so far?
Yeah, man, that's easy. Don't be so hard on yourself. I think we tend to have these really super high expectations. And for me, being a mother and then, working and then trying to balance, I'm married, right? I mean, and then the home and all of that. And then eventually the kids started getting married themselves. And so we always have this expectation of ourselves that probably totally outstrips anything that is based in reality. So I would go back in time if I could and tell my former self, don't be so hard on yourself, right? So, and if I would impart anything like that to anyone else, I would tell them the same thing. The other thing I would say, and these things sort of go hand in hand, is be brave. Do the thing that scares you, because I think sometimes we shy away from something because it's maybe overwhelming, or it's not an area that we feel comfortable. But I'm telling you, it took a lot of courage for me to write that book, especially when that's not my sweet spot, right? I mean, I'm an executive. So those would be the two things: is don't be so hard on yourself and be brave.
Awesome. And then the other thing I meant to ask you is, you could have written for any age group, really. What made you lean towards writing for middle graders?
I wrote for them because if you look at what middle grade content should consist of, there's no reason to put in like violence or, weapons of any kind. There's no sex scenes. There's going to be none of that stuff. And I kind of wanted to write for I know this is going to sound wacky, but I sort of wanted to write for more of a pure reader audience, because I didn't want to write those things. And I know in young adult, you're able to venture more into those things. And then obviously for the adults the same way. I just wanted to write a fun, it grabs you at the first sentence adventure story that kids could read about and look at the map and say, wow, I wonder what's going to happen to these people next. And that's the grade. Middle grade is that in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And with my own daughter, I, like right now, she's at that age where it depends on the moment whether or not I'm cool. She's a sixth grader. And so even just me giving her the book has to get some skepticism. So she's like, well, I haven't seen this book in my library, but I'm like, come on, let's read. And then so she read it. She started reading, and then she'll come back through and she'll say, so Mom, they have everything they need in their backpack. And so I'm like, and so she's thinking about it, and I'm watching her pick it up and read it. And so, yeah, it's just really fun to see that. How are you distributing your book and making it accessible so that different children can get a hold of it?
So it's obviously for sale wherever you can buy a book. And I've been trying to make my way through the Contra Costa Library. I don't know what to call it.
The circuit, maybe? You want to go down Contra Costa?
Oh my gosh. I've emailed the person who's I contacted the Lafayette Library, asked how can I get my book in the library so it can be accessible for everybody. And the person there that I spoke to, she was incredibly nice and friendly. She said, you need to email this person. So I've done that. I've emailed him, and then I waited a few weeks. I sent him another email, just trying to understand what the process is. I've offered to donate the books. I'm not looking for money. I just want kids to be able to read the book for free. Okay, so I did that. Meanwhile, I contacted Stanley Middle School, that librarian. I sent her a message asking the same thing. I will donate books to the library. I will give them to all the sixth grade teachers. I don't want anything in return. How can I do this? And I haven't heard anything back. So I don't know how to put the books into kids' hands, because I know that the schools, the libraries, they probably all have processes, and I don't know what the processes are. I'm even asking the question, tell me what the process is. I'll give them to you free. I'm not looking for money. The book is released. So if somebody could tell me how to do it, I would gladly do it.
Yeah, no, that's great. But and then the short answer is for people who start to hear about the story and they're interested, they can find it in places like Amazon and different like online
Yes.
platforms.
Yes, they can, there's an ebook, there's an Audible, there's a paperback, there's a hardcover. You can find it anywhere Audible books are sold. You can find it anywhere ebooks are sold. Barnes and Noble, Amazon, bookshop.org, independent books, anywhere that you can, books, any place online, you can find the book. If they sell the book, it's there online. And I also sell too. So if somebody were to contact me on my website, I have a contact form, I can actually mail them a copy of the book.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And I would say, if you're looking for I would say show up at the library, show up at the spaces and hand them a book. You can't go wrong. Because that way, I just think people get so inundated with so many different moving parts these days that, it's hard sometimes. The other question I wanted to ask you before I have you share all of your contact info or how we can follow your work is, this question is a little bit abstract, but maybe you'll have a response because of just you've been connected to so many different generations of people. And the question, I'll just ask it, is when you hear the phrase, the rhythm of change, what does that mean to you? And how does that apply to your life with all the various hats that you wear?
Yeah, so the rhythm of change, depending on where you are in your life, probably means different things to different people. For me right now, the rhythm of change it's more of a slow moving stream as opposed to when I was an executive and it was like the rip roaring rapids that were going to dump me off a cliff. So the rhythm of change, I would say to me, is being aware of what's around you and finding a way to live in harmony with whatever it is, whatever your circumstances are, the people you encounter, the world as we know it, and do no harm. I mean, to me, this whole rhythm of change is about coexisting and always putting like your best foot forward and treating people with kindness. And this whole rhythm of change that the world's going through today, it's a little scary. I mean, some of the things you read about on the news or you hear about, you're sort of like, wow, how did we go wrong? Where did we go wrong? But my rhythm of change is to enter everything with a feeling of I want to get to know you better. I want to get to understand you better. I want to be part of what you're doing. If I think it's meaningful and it's changing the world in positive ways, I want to be part of that rhythm of change. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
it totally does. And the other thing that's just kind of coming up for me as I'm talking to you, I think people feel burned out in various jobs and various things that they're doing. Maybe they're even holding on. It could be anything. They could be holding on to the wrong relationship or afraid to switch apartments even, or jobs. We might hold on to a job because we're afraid of what the alternative is. And from it sounds to me like you were able to somehow let go of that fear and maybe lean into or explore a curiosity. What would you say to somebody else who might be kind of in that space where they're curious what it's like to change, what it might look like to change, or they even have a dream over here, but the idea of leaving what's over here is too afraid, and we can even get paralyzed by our fear, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, it's really tricky because you almost have to be fearless. I think, especially women, I think men, I'll have to tell you this, men will apply for a job where they think they can do it. They don't meet all the requirements, but they have this innate belief in themselves, maybe for how they were raised. I don't know. They will apply for jobs where they don't meet 100% of the requirements. Women, on the other hand, won't do that. And so when I mentor women, this is something we talk about, is you don't have to meet every requirement. So if you're looking for a way or an opening to change in your life, I've never published a book before. I didn't meet the requirements of an author. I'm not a celebrity, I'm not somebody who has mass appeal across, broad streams of social media. But what I do have is confidence in my ability to try something, see if I'm good at it, and then take that leap. I mean, honestly, it's a leap of faith type attitude. It's also knowing what you don't know, right? There's a lot of things I don't know. So that's why I hybrid published. So I think when you want to make a change, you need to sort of surround yourself with others who've gone through that change, and maybe they can guide you or direct you. But some of it is just believing in yourself. It's self-belief. And if I failed at the book, what was the worst thing that was going to happen? But if I never tried, God, that would be horrible. I mean, some of the people who've read the story are like, oh my God, this is the most amazing story. So all I can say is surround yourself with a network of people who support your dreams and your beliefs, and who will be your cheerleaders as you go through whatever it is you're trying to go through. Don't do it alone. That's a key thing right there. Don't do it alone. Do it in the comfort with other people supporting you, and it sort of takes the edge off of it. And be brave.
That's beautiful. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before I have you give us your some information about how we can follow you?
Gosh, well, the only thing I would say is that writing this book changed me, and I hope people who read it are intrigued and remember life how it used to be when things were simpler. I hope, if nothing else, I hope that when kids read this story, it makes them think twice before they get on social media, or twice before they sit in front of a computer and play games. I hope they think about, well, maybe I will go for a walk, on the Lafayette Trail, or maybe I will, go sit in the backyard. I don't know. I hope it makes people go back to nature, and it turns people in the direction of meaningful relationships or meaningful experiences outside the box of technology.
Yeah, and hopefully at a minimum, at least it reminds people to keep those other threads alive, even as social media or like increasingly we need our kids to have a phone to get in touch with them because of the world we now live in. Hopefully it inspires people to keep those other pieces alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
How can we follow you, and when do we find your next book and all that good stuff?
So the easiest way to follow me is to go onto my website, because from my website you can see where you can see my Goodreads, Facebook, all my social media links are on my website. And my website it's just all one word. It's AnnMarieMazzotti-Govea.com. So it's all just one word.com. And so that's the easiest way to find me. Otherwise, because I had to shorten my name on some of the social media sites just because of the length of
it's pretty long. Yeah.
Yeah. So on my website, you'll actually see at the bottom of every page my social media links. So that's the easiest way. There's also a contact form on my website, and every single person who reaches out to me, I respond to. I don't ignore anybody, no matter what their question is. So you can also reach me through the contact form as well.
Okay, well, I really appreciate you taking time to talk with me today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sharon. I'm so glad we met, and I'm so grateful that you have the time to talk to me.
Thank you. And show us your book one more time before you go. All right, there it is. It's beautiful. All right, thank you so much. I can't wait to read it, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thanks, Sharon.
Thank you.